Hello and welcome back to another video for Sasayaki Glitter. Today I'm working with the Frappe Unicorn image, which is number 120 in the shop, and I will have a link for that in the description box down below, along with links to all the other products used if you would like to find those. I started by printing my image out onto some alcohol marker friendly paper, and I'm going to be colouring in with my Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers. The Illustrator markers differ slightly in colour from the other Spectrum Noir markers, but I have the caps on screen and that will at least give you a guideline of what colours I am using. So I'm starting by colouring the body of the unicorn using my lightest grey, which is ice grey, and I'm laying that into all my shadow areas, and then I'm using my blender pen to blend it out. I like to use circular motions to blend when I'm blending with my blender pen, which is usually blending to white, because I find this gives a softer blend. Then I moved on to colouring in the hooves, and I'm using much darker greys for this. These are my darkest greys. I'm starting with brown grey 6 in the shadow areas, and all my shadows I'm putting towards the left hand side. Then I will use brown grey 4 for my mid-tone. And on the lower hooves, the back hooves, I do put slightly on the right hand side just to give more dimension and curvature to the hooves. Finally, I go in with my brown grey 2 as my lightest colour to fill in the uncoloured area of the hooves. And they were a little bit pale for my liking, so I went back in with my darkest colour and redid the shadow areas just to darken it up a bit more. Next I coloured in the unicorn's nose, and I decided to go for pink for the nose. Initially I was thinking I would do kind of like I'd done on the body and blend out to white, so it would be a very pale looking pink. But in the end I decided to do the whole nose pink. So I'm using some PPs here for my pinks, and again laying my shadow in on the left hand side. I only had 2 shades to start with, but I did go in with the PP4 just to darken it up even more. I moved on to colouring the tail, and I'm going to do this yellow and blue, and I'm also doing the mane the same with yellow and blue stripes. I don't have very many yellows, so I'm using my go-to yellow shade, which is CT1 and CT3 as well as GY2. GY2 has an orange tone to it, it's a golden yellow, and it just adds some nice contrast into the yellow portions. Then I'm going to colour in my blue areas, and I checked the blue piece that's going to be for my background against my swatch sheet so I could work out which blues would be most appropriate colour tones for these areas. And I apologise, I didn't realise I had my image slightly out of frame, so you can't see what I'm doing at the top, but the mane and tail were both coloured the same way. I also coloured the inner portions of the ears with the same pinks I'd used on the nose. I added some grey to the unicorn's horn, and I also added some very light blue just to give some definition to the eyes. Having finished colouring the unicorn itself, I'm going to move on to colouring the coffee, and I'm using EBs for these, earth browns, and the darkest one, EB4, I again am laying in mostly on the left, but also bringing it around the bottom and up the right just very slightly, and again this is to help give the look of a curved area. Then I go in with my mid-tone EB2, and finally my lightest EB1, and I do have a little bit of trouble getting this to blend, but just working back and forth over it until the streaks go away, and then it blends nicely. I used TN1 as the darkest colour for my cream, and I'm laying it in again on the left and right hand sides to give the curve, and also along the lines drawn in the cream, and then I used some FS8 and 9 as my lighter shades. Finally, I put in my lightest yellow to colour the straw, and as it was such a small area I didn't bother adding any shading, although you could if you wanted. I then fussy cut my image out. This image has nice thick lines, so it's very easy to cut. It's not necessarily the easiest shape, but it's also not too fiddly to cut around. So it's fairly easy to fussy cut out. If you have a scan and cut machine, for example, you could use that to cut out the image, and that would be much quicker, but I do not yet have one for myself, so I will stick to fussy cutting for the time being. And I also cut out the area between the coffee and the nose of the unicorn just using my craft knife. As unicorns traditionally seem to have a lot of sparkle, I decided I would add some shimmer to mine using my Nuvo Aqua shimmer pen, and I'm just putting that all over the unicorn. I was very careful to avoid the printed lines because my printer ink is not waterproof and I didn't want to smudge them. I learned that the hard way, that they would smudge with my glitter pens. You could also use, for example, a Wink of Stella. I also have the Wink of Stella pen. I find that the Wink of Stella has more gold tones whilst the Nuvo pen has more kind of silvery tones, and I felt that the silver was more appropriate for this picture. And then I'm going to move on to creating my card base, and this card base is made of snippets of leftover smooshed watercolour pieces. And these were actually created when I'd been doing some ink blending and I had ink left over on my craft sheet each time with each colour, and I decided that rather than letting the ink go to waste, I would spray it with some water, and I picked it up on some snippets of watercolour paper so that I could get some smooshed pieces to use for future projects and the ink wouldn't be wasted. So I have the large panel in the background is Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide, and the long blue panel is Mermaid Lagoon, and the pink panel is Worn Lipstick. I'm going to edge each of my longer panels with iridescent glitter peel-offs, and I'm putting them along the top and bottom. The one on the pink panel, the top edge, the peel-off I used wasn't quite long enough, but I was able to add a small offcut just to fill out that last little end piece, and that worked just fine. You can't really see even the join between them, so no one will know. And as these glitter peel-offs are clear, they will pick up the colour of whatever you place them on. The peel-offs on the pink piece will pick up more of the pinkish tones, whereas the ones on the blue piece will have more of a blue look to them. Once I've finished adding them to my strips, I will carefully snip away the excess pieces and I will put them back onto the sheet that they came on, because even the little pieces could come in useful on later projects, so I don't want to waste any of it. Then I'm going to start adhering everything together. I put some very strong double-sided tape onto the back of all three of the watercolour pieces. They had warped a bit when I created them, so this strong double-sided tape makes sure that they will stay flat on the card and not bow at all. And I use my MISTI to help me line up the panels to make sure they get right to the edge so that they properly cover the card base. I did play around off camera with the layout so I could decide exactly how I wanted the two strips and the unicorn to go, and this also let me see how far up I wanted them so that when I then, using my MISTI, placed them back in, I knew exactly where to put them. For example, with the blue one, I am lining it up so that the top line is at the 2-inch mark. Then I will add my pink one going across the other way, and then I'm going to add the unicorn, and I decided to use my tape runner for this because then it would get glue even on all the fiddly pieces like the tail and the mane. My tape runner is perhaps not the strongest though, so it might have been better to use something a bit stronger for doing this. I use my reverse tweezers just to help me get it completely lined up, and once I'm happy with the position, I will press it into place. Then I'm going to add my sentiment, and I'm using a stamp set from Love from Lizzie for this sentiment. I'm stamping it onto the blue strip using Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide, and to make sure that my final word of my sentiment is lined up how I want it, I stamped it first onto a piece of acetate because that way I could check the position and adjust it if needed. Finally, I'm going to add some embellishment with some Nuvo drops, and I'm using Limoncello and Sea Breeze in the jewel drops. These dry translucent, so they were perhaps not the best ones to use because they don't really show up, especially in such small pieces. I'm also putting the Sea Breeze on the glasses, but I don't have them in the crystal drops, which would have worked better. So I wanted to have the blue and the yellow, so I just went with those anyway. And that completes my card. Thank you so much for watching this video featuring the Frappe Unicorn digi stamp. As I mentioned, all my products that I have used are listed and linked down in the description box. If you have any questions about this card or anything else that I can help you with, leave them in the comments down below. There are some more videos on screen now that you may enjoy, and you can also click the bubbles on screen. There's one for my channel and one for the Sasayaki Glitter channel so you can subscribe to those, and you can also click the bell button down below so that you will receive notifications every time we put a new video up. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!